Okay, so that was the warm-up. Let's move on to the rest of the lesson. So this is the second part of the day 2 lesson. Write a polynomial function of least degree with real coefficients, blah, 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 in partially factored form with the given zeros. So we're being given zeros, and we've got to write factors and a full polynomial from them. To get a factor, we're going to write x minus the 0 for every 0 we've been given. And we've got to write our answer in partially factored form. That means our final answer will have no irrational numbers in it and no complex numbers in it. We're going to multiply it out just enough to get rid of those. So let's look at number 7. We want a polynomial, give it a name, we'll call it f of x, and it would be x minus 3, it's x plus 3. We've got a 0 of x equals 1, so our factor would be x minus 1. It has multiplicity of 2. What that multiplicity of 2 means is this one will be squared. Repeats twice. And then, we've got a complex one. What you have to remember is that complex zeros and irrational zeros always come in pairs. They have their conjugate. The conjugate of 4i would be negative 4i. Make a note to yourself. Irrational and complex zeros are always in conjugate pairs. So, for instance, if you had something complex like a plus ib, its partner would be, if you had x equals that, you would also have x equals a minus ib. It comes from the square root part, even if it's the square root of negative 1, always comes in plus minus. If you think about the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Anything that's irrational or complex, you always have a plus and a minus in front of the square root part. That's why they're always in conjugate pairs. That's what we mean by that. So let's get the zeros finish off this problem. We'll have x minus the one we were given, and x minus the one we made up, and minus negative 4i will turn into plus 4i. Now, we have to have our answer with no i's in it. I want to see that in your work, but we're going to have to multiply those together. Now, the way I'd like you to multiply them together is to always recognize when you've got difference of squares. Remember, difference of squares if you ever see two factors with the same beginning and end, and one of them's got a plus and the other's got a minus, doesn't matter what order they're in, if you multiply those out using FOIL, you'd get a squared. The outer gives you minus ab, the way I've written there. The inner gives you plus ab, and the last term gives you plus times a minus is a minus, b times b is b squared. And these two bits cancel. So difference of squares, whenever you've got a plus b times a minus b, you always end up with, how do I write it? You'd always end up with just simply a squared, the beginning squared, minus the back squared. A squared minus b squared. So let's put that into practice here. We've got f of x, write down all the factors, can't just skip bits. And what our a is here, the bit before the minus and the plus, that's the a, that's x, the x squared. Then we have minus, it's always difference of squares. And then our b is 4i, so square that, you have to square the 4 and the I. So you get 4 squared, I squared. Remember that I is the square root of negative 1, so I squared is negative 1. So what I'm subtracting here is I'm subtracting 16 times negative 1. I'm subtracting negative 16, so I'm adding 16 there. x plus 3, x minus 1 squared, x squared plus 16. Let's try these ones. So on these two, again, I've been given something complex. It's going to have a partner in front of just the square root part. You've got to have if you've been given a minus 1, there's a plus 1. If you've been given a plus 1, there's a minus 1. Okay, let me pause the video. I think somebody's at my door. Nope. So let's write this out. This one would be f of x equals x plus 1, x minus 2. Now I have, don't forget, you've got to put the x minus what we've been given, x minus 2 minus I would be plus I, and x minus 2 minus plus I, so it'll be minus I here. Now look at it. Can you see we can't have these last two? We've got to do something with these because they've got i's in them. But there's a way we can multiply them together that makes it look easy. Can you see we've got difference of squares again? They have the same beginning and the same end, and in the middle, one of them's got a plus and the other's got minus. That plus and minus are separating our A from our B. What we've got here is A plus B, A minus B, where our A equals x minus 2 and our B equals I. So we're going to replace it with a squared minus b squared. That's what we're going to do with the green part. So let's write out the whole thing again. We have f of x equals x plus 1, x minus 2, and now think. We've got a plus b times a minus b, which we're going to replace with a squared minus b squared. So write down your a, x minus 2, write down your b, I. Both of them need to be squared, and there's a minus that goes between them. Now let's simplify that. Let's work out what this is. We've got x plus 1, x minus 2, then x minus 2 squared. Think about it. X minus 2 times x minus 2. If you can do it in your head, that's wonderful. If you can't, let's work out what it is. It's first, the last would be minus 2x, the outer would be minus 2x, the inner would be minus 2x, and your last is negative 2 times negative 2, which is plus 4. So this turns into x squared minus 4x plus 4. But if you can do that in your head, which a lot of people can, you can just do it here. Just do x squared minus 4x plus 4. That was just your a squared. Then you've got the minus sign. Then you've got I squared. And remember that I equals the square root of negative 1. So I squared equals the square root of negative 1 squared, which simply equals negative 1. So we're subtracting negative 1. So that gives us x plus 1, x minus 2, x squared minus 4x, plus 4, minus 1 is like plus 1, so 4 plus 1 is plus 5. That's this one. So let's do some practice. So have a look at these two. I'm going to give you the answers. If you know the answers, you don't need to do the rest of the video. You could just skip ahead. But if you need some help, I've got my answers written down somewhere where I did these earlier. Okay, so pause your video and give them a go. If you get this, and this one should turn into then you know what you're doing, and you can miss the rest of this video. Okay, if you didn't get that, let's go through how to get there. So, this one's partner would be 1 plus 2i. This one's partner would be 2 in front of the square root part. We put minus. Don't forget I is the square root part. So, we need to write a quadratic polynomial f of x given one complex 0. If you're given one complex zero, you know it has a friend. It's got its conjugate. These together make a conjugate pair. Okay, now we're going to write the polynomial. We'll call it f of x. And we're going to turn each zero into a factor by writing x minus the zero. So if I'm subtracting 1 minus 2i, don't forget in your head, if you're subtracting that, you've got to distribute that to both of those. It'd be minus 1 plus 2i. And then your second one would be x minus 1, just distributing to there and there, be minus 1 minus 2i. Look for difference of squares. Those have got the same beginning and the same end. They've both got x plus 1, they've both got 2i, but they're different here. So that's telling you you've got difference of squares again. So this is going to be, that's your a plus b, and this is your a minus b. So we're going to replace that with a squared minus b squared. So our a squared is x minus 1 squared. Then we're going to have subtract, that's my a squared, and then I need my b, which is 2i, and I need to square that. Okay, let's move that answer away. So that gives me x minus 1 squared. Do whatever work you need to do. It would be x squared minus 2x plus 1 minus 2i squared would be 2 squared, which is 4, multiplied by I squared, which is minus 1. So this is minus 4. We've got subtract negative 4. It's like adding 4. So that's how we end up with x squared minus 2x, 1 plus 4 gives me 5 plus 5. Okay, so that was that one. Let's do our second one. So I have my I've got my pair. Let's do this in a different color. I'll do this one in blue. Call this one, I'll call it f of x again. So I have x minus my zeros and x minus 2. If I'm subtracting this, that will turn into a plus. I've got difference of squares again. Here's where they split, the difference between the a and the b. So let's multiply this out. I've got, that's my a minus b, a plus b. So my a is x minus 2. So difference of squares, I've got x minus 2 squared minus 3i squared. That's my a squared minus b squared. This would give me, you can do that x minus 2 squared off the side if you want, but if you do it in your head and reliably get it right, that's what you get from x minus 2 squared. Then you've got this minus and 3i squared, or the 3 squared gives you 9, and the I squared gives you a negative, so you're subtracting a negative, which turns that into plus. So your answer is x squared minus 4x plus 30. That's the end of video 2 for today. There's one more coming.